on this evening to Side Streets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. I am your host, Angela Chen, and I am proud to say that not only am I an alum of Chicago State University, but Chicago State University has been a pillar in the community for more than 150 years now, serving students on the south side of Chicago and extending to the nearby suburbs in northwest Indiana. And as we all know that Chicago State currently is in crises. I graduated from Chicago State May of 2014, where I received my undergraduate degree of psychology. And I am very proud to have in the studio with me my former professor, Professor M.Z. Moore, who taught me so many valuable lessons about being proud of where I came from, but even more so about being proud to represent Chicago State University. So let's get right into it. We know that we're kind of pressed for time a little bit, so let's get right into it. And so while they play these games, these political games, particularly with lives, these students have become pawns in this political chess game. Can you tell us the adverse impact that not only does it have on the students, but the community as well?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on your show.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is wonderful, and it's good to see you. I talked to Governor Rauner. I called his office at least, and I talked to some of his people, and I've called there about maybe 10 times. And so, as I understand it, Governor Rauner doesn't want to sign off on a budget because he wants the Democrats to agree to his workers' compensation reform as well as his pension reform. And so Madigan, of course, who is the Speaker of the House, is not going to agree with that because his constituents are the unions. And so when you look at the broader context, Rauner does have a logical reason why he wants to do what he does. I know the last time I checked the state's comptroller's website, the state was $4 billion in debt. And I read somewhere that it was $9 billion in debt. And so that gives them a strong argument to say that we need to reduce the deficit. And so, and his major argument, as I understand it, is this makes us less competitive in terms of businesses coming to the state. And what he's trying to do is say, okay, we can reduce costs by reforming pensions and workers' compensation reform. Workers' compensation. And if we do that, then it'll make us more competitive. But at what cost? Right? And that's the question. And it's true that some of the state revenues have dried up because businesses have left Illinois. But I don't think that you should balance the budget on poor people's back. And so Chicago State, when you look at the school, which was founded almost 150 years ago, as you said, service in the Black community, mostly Black communities. And most of the students we have are quote unquote non-traditional. I don't like that term, but I understand what they mean. And when you look at our student population, particularly if you look at the institutional research, more than half our students live below the federal poverty line. So when we look at Chicago State, what we're basically doing is we're helping people to transition from a life of poverty to have the skills and human capital necessary to be able to navigate the labor market. And so when you're impacting Chicago State, what you're doing is impacting a significant amount of first-time college graduates. You're impacting a significant amount of people who are showing grit and motivation and have hope of exiting poverty and maybe at least moving toward the lower middle class. But also you're impacting an enormous amount of professionals there at this school. I have colleagues like Dr. Mulligetta, who's my chair of my department, who won a $1.9 million grant from the Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Leslie Roundtree, who has a $12 million HBCUs grant, which helps a lot of Black people and minorities in general to be able to go into the healthcare profession, otherwise they wouldn't be able to go into. And so there's a lot of good work going on, even as, you know, in terms of the professors being there as well as the students. So I just don't think that they see the full picture. And unfortunately, over the years, we've created an image at Chicago State that demonstrates that we're incompetent, that we're not necessarily up to task, but that's just not so. So we have to change the narrative, and we're doing that on the show, I hope. You know?
Well, I want to say thank you. Well, getting back to being a student of yours, I remember walking into your class,
Hmm.
and I remember saying, okay, I got this. I can write. I can really write. I can really write. And professor, you handed my paper back with all these red marks. Even a side note that says you need to go to the academic writing lab.
Did I say that? I'm sorry.
However, that had such a profound impact on me, in that I made it a point to learn how to write,
Yeah.
not just, but in the world of academia,
Yeah.
and to be able to compete, coming from a level of being the underdog, so to
Yeah.
speak,
Yeah.
and being able to compete with those who have been writing for many years.
Yeah.
And so I want to extend a sincere thanks, to you, because you really changed the course of my life.
Thank you very much. That's humbling. Yeah.
And so getting back to the topic, Chicago State University in crises. Um, just on yesterday, I drove past there,
Hmm.
and it was a bit of an eerie feeling,
Yeah.
because the news stations, they were out there covering that I want to say 300 some individuals had received their pink slips.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. How does that, I mean, I understand in terms of the numbers, ratio, student to body ratio, but what other adverse impact does this have on not just the student body, but the professors as well?
Well, one of the things that happened in February was the university declared what was called financial exigency. And when I heard the board of directors and the president say financial exigency, I knew the word was too fancy and I knew there was something wrong with that word. But what it essentially says is that professors, whether you're tenured or non-tenured, contracts will not be honored. Essentially, what it's saying. What that does to the university, a few things. One, it decreased programs dramatically. So programs that they see are non-essential will be cut, right? Because there's no one to teach them. Okay. And so that limits the type of education that students get at Chicago State. And that's really a tragedy. And it's really a shame. But I do think that Chicago State going to demonstrate resiliency. I think that we're going to come back from this. I think we're going to be a better school. I think that unfortunately politics played a role in this. I think that Rauner, who's a Republican, who's a right-wing ideologue, who I see as a libertarian, I think that he saw Chicago State as the patronage dumping ground for blacks who were connected to the Democratic machine. But what he failed to realize is that we have experts who teach there. I mean, people who are well trained, people who got their PhDs from Harvard University, Yale University, University of Chicago. These are not dumb people that's teaching our young students. But not only that, I think that what it has done more than anything, it has basically destroyed an institution that really nurtures Black and minority students, right? So it's not just academics. As you know, in my class, this is more than just academics. This is about ensuring that our students are successful, right? This is about supporting our students and being honest with our students so they can be competitive. So it's not just about getting a degree. It's about, challenging you, right? Making you work hard, making you understand that you're going to be competing in the world, not just in the United States, but a labor market that's international, global. And so I don't think that our students would get that at other schools. And I'm an alum of HBCUs, so I believe in HBCUs or PBIs, predominantly Black institutions, or minority serving institutions. I believe in those because I know what they do for our people and our students. And so to me, and I really hate to say this, but this is how I feel. I think that some of the attacks that have happened on Chicago State have been racist, quite frankly. Now, I can't prove that. I don't have no data. I don't have no statistical analysis, but that's what I feel and that's what I believe. Yeah.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a break and come back. I am Angela Champ, your host, here on Sidestreets and Intersections for IntellectualRadio.com. And if you are looking for an opportunity to host your own show, please 21 or call 708-223-8953. Welcome back. Welcome back. I am Angela Champ for Sidestreets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. And if you're looking for an opportunity to explore hosting your own show, please call 708-223-8953. And if you're not being fed, it must mean that you're hungry. So back to the subject matter, Chicago State, a university in crises. Um, it's very somber when you think about State, the history of Chicago State being a primary teaching institution.
Yeah.
Not only that, if I am correct, Chicago State graduates more African Americans in the state of Illinois than a lot of other institutions, if I'm correct.
Yeah. I think Reverend Jesse Jackson, I think he said, and I hope I'm not sure, but I think he said 1 in every 6 African Americans graduate from Chicago State. So people with bachelor's degrees, 1 in 6 in the state of Illinois come from Chicago State. That's a significant amount, and I hope that's that right. So I'm not sure, but I know a significant amount of our people do come from Chicago State, and a significant amount of first generation graduates come from Chicago State.
And so, with regard to speculated about the funding, there was a last minute, I guess, I don't know how to say this, but there was a last minute where they signed off on some monies, but it was a day late, $1 short.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that just a little bit for us?
So when I initially, Governor Rounding wanted to make a 31% budget cut to in terms of budgets for higher education. He wanted to cut the budget 31% in terms of funding to higher education. The Democrats wanted to cut it 6%. So this was how far they were apart in terms of budget cuts that needed to be made. So there was no real compromise on that level. And so he, of course, this budget impasse has been going on for about maybe 9 months now, something like that. And so what he's done, because I think Chicago State get about $40 million from the state, okay? But he has allocated $20 million. So not only did he get his 31% cut, he actually got a 50% cut because he only gave half the money. What does that do? Just what you saw yesterday. Several people getting pink slips, several programs getting cut. Bills, I'm sure they have to pay bills over there, light bill, water. The people got to get paid some kind of way. They got to restore their reserve funds. So that $20 million is a drop in the bucket in terms of what's required. But again, I think that, and I don't want to just blame it on the governor either. I mean, I think they all playing games in Springfield, quite frankly, including the speaker. So I think they all playing with Black people's lives and people of color's lives. So I don't want to sugarcoat that. But I do think, though, and I understand the governor's perspective, that we do have to reduce deficits to make the state more competitive. There's a lot of jobs or companies won't come here because they feel like they're going to be taxed to death. At the same time, I believe in unions because, they give you the protections that you otherwise wouldn't have, labor protection. So, it's a tricky piece, but we're paying a significant cost as a result of this, right? But yeah, that $20 million is like, it's not even half. I think it may be half of what we supposed to get. And we got it, what's this, May? 1 month before the end of the fiscal year. So we went a whole fiscal year without any funding from the state, and we're a state university. But not just Chicago State, Northeastern, Western, and Eastern. Some of the bigger schools have not been able to fall because they had endowments and that sort of thing. And it's probably difficult to get some of the alums from Black schools because we have to deal with the racism in the labor market. We're not making the kind of money that white people make. So we're not able to donate the kind of money they donate. That's just what it is. So, so we're dealing with that. But I do also think that we need to take responsibility as Black people as well and start raising funding, raising money, making sure we have endowments, make sure we're not dependent on people like Rauner and Madigan and these folks. And so when we're in this space again, we won't have to be struggling like we're struggling. So this is a lesson learned for us as well. Yeah.
And so you talk about Chicago State and Chicago State, I am Chicago State. And being resilient, I am resilient. That being said, if because we always have to think about the if.
Hmm.
And if a solution is not reached that could restore
Hmm.
some of what's been lost, then what do you see with regard to the future of Chicago State and in terms of a time frame?
I don't know, but what I do believe is that we're going to bounce back. We have a wonderful president. His name is Dr. Thomas J. Calhoun. He's familiar with HBCUs. He came from the University of North Alabama. I respect his intellect. I respect the way he responded to the governor when the governor came out and basically castigated Chicago State. He did it with such dignity and grace. I think he's a smart man. I think he needs to make sure he has the right people around him to move the university forward. But I don't think we're going to close permanently. I do think that Chicago State going to be different for a little bit. And I don't necessarily think small is bad. I came from Hampton University, and we were a small school. So I don't necessarily think that small is bad, but I do think that we have to have people in place that are efficient, smart, can raise money, can build an endowment, and basically change the brand of Chicago State. That's what I do believe.
So let me ask you,
Yeah.
what is it that I can do, being an alum of Chicago State University, being the face of Chicago State University? What are some of the things? Because oftentimes we hear about endowments, we hear about donate, we hear about all these different things, but sometimes we don't have the accessibility.
Yeah.
So, what would you suggest that I do to contribute to the better good?
Two things: join the Alumni Association, but also talk to President Calhoun himself, and ask him, you know, what can be done in terms of holding people accountable, because we're not giving money to people to do what they want to do with the money. Okay. When we give donations back to the school, people need to do the right thing with the money. Okay. So I would say, talk to Dr. Calhoun, try to understand, how can we hold people accountable for the money that's being donated? Because if people don't trust what you're doing, if they can't see that their money is being used properly, they're not going to donate. But if they see that their money is used wisely and that it's actually going to school and they're seeing programs being, for example, I look at Hampton, for example, they've grown tremendously since I left. They got a couple of PhD programs. So you don't mind donating to that. You understand what I'm saying? But if you don't see any growth and you see a bunch of stuff, people is not going to do that. So I would say, basically talk to Dr. Calhoun. I'm definitely a huge supporter of Chicago State. I love Chicago State University. It's one of the best places I ever worked in my life. This is the most I've talked about it because I get very upset about it. I get very emotional about it because I know what it's doing to our community. So I try not to talk about it too much. But because it was you, Miss Champ, I said I'll come on your show and talk about it. But I haven't talked about it at all. Not on Facebook. I don't know if you know, I try not to post about it because it makes me upset, because I don't think people understand the ramifications, the significance of what's being done here, the damage that it's going to do to the Black community. I don't think people understand that. They will in about 20 years. So that's what I'm saying. But I don't think it's going to close. I think it's going to be different. And I do think under Dr. Calhoun's leadership, it will grow. I do believe that.
Well, I want to thank you. I know we are pressed for time. Oh, no, but I would like for you to come back.
Okay.
And as we continue understanding this crisis at Chicago State University,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps you could bring some more individuals, if that would be okay, so that we can get a better understanding.
Okay.
I know I will do everything in my power to get the word out.
Okay.
Because I think that it's okay to have a lot of dialogue and discussion, but we have to have action.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's
so
right.
I think that today is the day of one of many.
Yeah.
That starts, that talks about action.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you.
We do have a few more minutes. So for our iHeartRadio listeners, for members of the IntellectualRadio.com family, as well as Sidestreets and Intersections, there's a little bit that we don't know about Professor Amzie Moore. So can you just kind of let people know about who you are and a little bit about your bloodline, because we got some history in here.
Okay. What you want me to? Oh, so what you want to say? about.
Well, we know that your dad was a big civil rights um, fighter for civil rights,
Yeah,
and you are a graduate, an alum of the University of Chicago, and because that speaks to what we have at Chicago State University.
right, right.
So, we got a few minutes, so can you just kind of expound on it just a little bit?
Sure. So my father, of course, he was engaged in the civil rights movement. He actually started working in the civil rights movement in the 1930s in Mississippi, and he laid a significant foundation for the people who came for Freedom Summer, particularly Bob Moses and Diane Nash, and James Farmer, Stokely Carmichael. All the people, SNCC came there as a result of him. We just recently remodeled his home. The state of Mississippi declared it a historic landmark. We received a grant from Governor Haley Barbour from in the Mississippi Department of Archives and History to renovate it. So now it's been turned into a museum and interpretive center. We actually did the ribbon cutting ceremony March 28th. And so it has a lot of, if you go to Mississippi and Cleveland, you'll see all the exhibits of him. But anyway, my dad did quite a bit. He worked with the Johnson administration during the time in the 1960s, the mid 1960s, late 1960s, with President Johnson's War on Poverty program. He brought Head Start there. He brought affordable housing there, subsidized housing to Cleveland, Mississippi. But he also worked closely with SNCC. He also worked closely with the Regional Council of Negro Leadership. He was president of the NAACP for over 30 years. So he did a lot of work in Mississippi to help bring equality to our people. So, yeah.
Wow. So I just want to say that we are coming to the end of Side Streets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Professor MZ Moore.
Thank you for bringing me on. I appreciate this. Yeah.
And I would like for you to come back because I think that one conversation, one show is not enough to talk about the significance of what Chicago State and the students will be facing. I am Angela Champ for Side Streets and Intersections here on IntellectualRadio.com. And we must understand that we must all aspire to inspire before we expire. And if you find that you're feeling hungry, it's because you must be fed. I am Angela Champ. Until next week.
Thank you very much.